Welcome to Open Water Wednesday.
Ted and Greta, both 83 years old, were fierce rivals in the early 1960s. They both set English Channel records. Greta did a double crossing of the Catalina Channel in 1958, and Ted did a double crossing of the English Channel in 1965. Nearly 50 years after their encounters from Lake Michigan to the English Channel, they meet again in California. They share laughs and old stories. Their respect for one another as competitive rivals and old friends is evident. 50 years has gone by, and yet, when these two interact, time seems like it stands still. They faced off against each other, but they also faced off against the elements. Ted explains on Open Water Wednesday how he was able to withstand the cold, the bleak, and the painful in the 1960s. Greta understands exactly what he faced because she was right there fighting against those very same elements. Now, fast forward 5 decades, and a new generation of swimmers takes to the open water. Men like Vito Biala, not born a swimmer, but born an adventurer. Not an Olympic champion like Greta, but he understands what it takes to be able to dig deep and succeed against all odds. Vito himself will carry on Ted's legacy, a legacy based on the willpower and strength of character to swim from point A to point B. In their own words, Open Water Wednesday talks with Ted, Greta, and Vito.
Walking around, living.
I'm feeling good?
Yeah.
Wow.
How about you?
I'm still moving around.
That's what you're supposed to do when you get old.
That's right. You don't want to just sit around do nothing, right?
Right.
How about that?
Yeah.
What are you doing now?
We drove down because this guy wants to try to break my Farallone record.
Oh, yeah?
You know him, Vita? You know this guy?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know of you. I still feel great.
Really?
Yeah. I think from all the swimming, I'm very healthy.
That's nice. I still think.
Yeah, you know, it just really makes you... Hey, guys! Hey! Freestyle, up and back. Let's go. Tumble turn. I'm glad the mother's not here. Then I can't talk.
Good morning. We're here at Open Water Wednesday with Ted Erickson and Vito Biala. These are two incredible gentlemen that we're going to bring to a worldwide audience. And Ted, if you could just tell us a little bit about your history.
I'm an old man.
Old man who's done a lot of incredible things.
I started swimming to get rid of my stress in my head back in, after college. After college, I had to make a living, and then I got interested in the Lake Michigan swims, 61, 62, and 63. And I was successful on my very first swim.
How far was it?
Michigan City, 36 3/4 miles. I was the first person to finish. I also was the last person to finish because everybody else dropped out of the race.
What was the time, the water
36
temperature?
hours and 37 minutes.
And the water temperature? You remember?
60s, mid-60s.
Okay.
It wasn't cold water.
Okay.
But it was it was rough. It had a big northeaster. That was the reason many people dropped out. And in fact, most of the swimmers said that nobody was going to finish it. But I figured that with everybody else out, I didn't have to worry. I got first place. All I had to do was finish. So I kept plugging along and plugging along. Finally got here. Then he ran 62 and 63 swims. I made money on that. $3,600 and $100 a mile. So I thought, oh boy, I'd go for money. So next year, Greta Anderson had to come through, and she beat me. She takes a $10,000 purse. I got myself a $1,000 pat on the back, which wasn't bad, but...
And this distance was 50 miles? 50 miles.
And she still lords it over me, actually. And he said, I beat you again. I beat every male swimmer in the world. Every male swimmer that I've ever swum against, I beat him. So then next year I thought, well, $15,000 to swim to Benton Harbor, 60 miles. So I got in that swim, and this goofy Egyptian, Abdulatif Abu Heef, comes through and beat me again. So I thought, aha, 60 miles, a round-trip channel is what? That's not even 60 miles. I'm going to go do a round-trip channel, because Abertondo had just done a 43-hour crossing. I was very, very slow. I knew I could beat him hands down. All I had to do was swim round-trip channel at that 40 miles, 43 miles. So that's how I got interested in channel swimming. I went over in 65, 64, and gave it a try, hit a storm, wiped out. In fact, I still remember my, it was part of my daughter's graduation present. I had her along, and she was on the boat, and I made it to a one-way crossing, England to France, and I was on my way back, and we hit a storm. And the captain was telling my daughter to say something encouraging, because we have to get the next tide or we'll have to go for another 8 hours. So he said, Miss Erickson, he said, your doctor has something to say. Now, he had primed her on what to say. You know, say something encouraging, because he's got to get going. And so I remember my daughter gets on the phone. He said, Dad, he said, you don't have to swim if you don't want to. So I quit, because I didn't want to. And then the next year I went back and got it, 30 hours and 3 minutes.
For a double crossing?
Yeah. That was when I got interested in the Farallon swim, because a business associate of mine said, hey, you did a double crossing channel. The Farallons is only 26 miles, or 27, something like that. He said, you ought to have no problem with that. So I got into the Farallons.
Vito, for our audience, can you explain where the Farallons is and what makes it difficult?
Well, the Farallons is west of the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, 27 nautical miles outside the Golden Gate. It is shark-infested waters. They come visit annually, and cold. September, October, November, December. And they feed, and then they head off to Hawaii. So best time to swim is when it's not as cold, water temperature, which happens to be September, October. So you can trade that off. But the conditions are very, very rough. You have cross currents going north, going south. It's shallow out there. It's 100 feet. Then you have the shipping channel, and then you have a potato patch where it's 25 feet. And you have westerly winds, usually. You got strong currents. You got 4.5 to 5.5 knot currents sometimes, and it's probably the most difficult conditions in the world to swim in. It is for sailors, because that's the sport that I came from. And they said the potato patch is as rough as any place in the world for sailors.
Wow.
So it has to be for swimmers as well. So.
Wow. And Ted, you did this back in '67. Actually, you did
I tried in 66.
What happened? Can you explain that?
I was reported dead because I went totally hypothermic, and the water was down into the 51, 50. In fact, might even been under that. Ike Patsky pulled me out, and they put me on the boat. They couldn't feel a pulse, so they reported me dead. And went over to radio, and my wife heard about that and said, "Aha, I'm rich. Call the insurance company." Then I went back the next year. But geez, now the real trick, the only advice I can give to this young man over here, he's a spitting image of what I used to feel like when I was his age, is you got to get in contact with the man upstairs. Okay? If you make the right phone call, you can get perfect weather conditions. as if you've been going to church.
So in 67, you
In
must...
67, I had perfect conditions. The water was warm, 57, 58. I don't think it ever, I mean, I'd have been 55 for a while, but I don't think it ever went under 55.
Huh.
And flat, no problem.
Huh.
It was a breeze. Like I say, I could have done the swim anytime.
Yeah, except you mentioned one that your boat captain pulled something out of his...
Oh, that was 66.
66. What? Can you explain what that's
when
there?
I failed. My big story is the one I failed because that's where I was reported dead. That's where I'm swimming along, and well, you got to start the start. Going out, I didn't know much about the parallels, and I asked this boat captain, who was a very successful Dave Kinley, who runs the EDK. If anybody hears about where the EDK is,
Thank you for watching Open Water Wednesday. See you next week.